My ex-husband's new wife showed up at my bakery on a Saturday morning with a smile like she already had the keys in her purse, and she said the kindest sounding, ugliest thing anyone has ever said to me across my own counter. "We don't want this to get messy, Marin. We're just here to take what Dean and I are owed." She had a leather folder tucked under one arm, and a man in a gray suit standing a half step behind her, the kind of suit that costs more than my walk-in freezer. I wiped my hands on my apron, which still had cinnamon sugar ground into the seams, and I stepped back from the door. I let my attorney walk in past me, and I got to watch that smile come off her face one piece at a time, like frosting sliding off a cake left too long in a hot car. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because to understand why I felt the floor tilt the right way for once that morning, you have to know how long I'd been standing on it, crooked. I own a bakery called Hazel and Rye on the main drag of a small town in southern Ohio, the kind of town where the hardware store still writes your total on a paper pad and the high school football scores get announced at the diner. I named it after my grandmother Hazel, who taught me to laminate dough on a marble slab she kept in her basement because the kitchen ran too warm. When she passed, she left me $41,000 and a note that said in her shaky cursive, "Do the thing you're scared to do." I used every cent of it, plus a small business loan I co-signed alone, to buy a narrow brick storefront with a tin ceiling and a leaking back sink. That was 9 years ago. My husband at the time, Dean, thought it was a cute hobby. "Your little pie shop," he'd call it at dinner parties, smiling at me like I was a child showing off a drawing. For a while, I let it slide because I loved him, and because Dean had a way of making you feel like the unreasonable one for noticing the obvious. He sold commercial insurance, and he was good at it, which is to say, he was good at getting people to sign things without reading them. We had 2 kids, Owen and Mabel, and a house with a porch swing, and from the road, our life looked exactly like the kind of life you'd want. I believed that road view for a long time. I want to be honest about something, because I've had years to be honest with myself, and there's no point lying to you now. I knew before I knew. There's a kind of knowing that lives in your stomach a long time before your brain agrees to it. Dean started going to the gym at 10 at night. He got a new phone passcode and got cagey about it in a way he played off his work confidentiality. He started criticizing little things about me that had never bothered him before. My laugh, the way I left flower handprints on my jeans, like he was building a case to himself for why leaving would be reasonable. The woman's name was Brooke. She did the books part-time for a couple of small businesses in town, including, for about 8 months, mine. I found out the way half the women I know find out, which is not in some dramatic confrontation, but in a dumb, ordinary moment. I was using his tablet to pull up a recipe because my hands were covered in butter, and the message previewed across the top of the screen. It said, "Tell her after the lake house weekend, not before. It's cleaner that way." I didn't even cry at first. I stood in my own kitchen and read it 3 times, and the thing I kept catching on was the word cleaner, like I was a spill. The divorce itself I could have survived. Plenty of women survive a divorce and come out the other side standing taller. What nearly broke me was how he did it. Dean didn't just want out, he wanted out without paying for it, and in his mind paying for it included the bakery. Here's where I have to back up and explain something, because I know if I were watching this I'd be yelling at the screen, "Why didn't you just settle the building in the divorce? Isn't that the whole point of a divorce?" The answer is that Dean made sure we couldn't on purpose. Ohio splits marital property equitably, not down the middle, and the fight was always going to be over what counted as marital. The building should have been simple. I bought it with Hazel's money, my separate inheritance, before things ever got complicated. But early on, when the bakery was young and I was drowning, Dean had offered to help with the books to save us the accountant fee. I was grateful. I let him fold the bakery's finances into a tangle of our personal accounts, a home equity line, a credit card he opens in both our names, transfers back and forth that I never tracked, because who tracks that when they trust someone? By the time the lawyers got involved, the paper trail looked, on the surface, like the bakery had been built with marital money. He'd spent 8 years quietly muddying the water, and then he stalled. He requested continuances. He lost documents. He let the bills pile up so I'd be too scared and too broke to keep fighting. The plan was simple and it was cruel. Make it take so long and cost so much that I'd hand him a piece of the bakery just to make it stop. What he didn't count on was Camille. People in the comments of stories like this always ask where the lawyer comes from, like she appears in a puff of smoke right when she's needed. Mine didn't. Camille had been coming into Hazel and Rye every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 years before any of this, ordering a cardamom bun and a flat white and reading actual paper case files at the corner table because she said the bakery was the only place in town that didn't smell like a courthouse. We've become the kind of friends who don't socialize outside, but genuinely light up when the other walks in. She did family law, and she was very good and very tired of men like Dean. The first week the separation got ugly. She set her coffee down, looked at me over her glasses, and said, "Marin, I'm going to say this once as your friend, and then I want you to come see me as a client. Don't sign anything. Not one thing." Then she paid for her bun like always, because she said mixing the tab in would be unprofessional, which tells you everything about her. So that's the lawyer. She came from the corner table. The divorce dragged for almost 2 years. 2 years is a long time to keep a bakery open, while a man you used to love tries to bleed you dry. I learned things about myself in that stretch I'm not proud of, and a few I am. I learned I could open at 4:30 in the morning on 3 hours of sleep and still get the croissants right. I learned that crying while you pipe royal icing does not in fact ruin the icing, which felt like the only mercy the universe was offering me that winter. What I want to tell you about, though, isn't the legal stuff. Not yet. It's the kids, because they were in this the whole time, not just at the end. And I think that's the part people forget. Divorce gets talked about like it's a contest between two adults. It isn't. There were two other people in my house, smaller, who'd done nothing to deserve any of it. Owen was 9. He'd started keeping a little notebook of Dad's schedule, writing down which weekends Dean said he'd take him and crossing them off when Dean canceled. And the crossed-off ones outnumbered the kept ones by a lot. One night, I found him asleep with the notebook open and a pencil still in his hand, and I sat on the edge of his bed and I had to put my fist against my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound. Mabel was 12, old enough to understand more than I wanted her to. She stopped asking when Dad was coming back. She started instead asking me very practical, very grown-up questions that broke my heart worse than crying would have. "Mom, if we lose the bakery, do we lose the house too? Mom, are we poor now?" I told her we were going to be fine because I had decided we were going to be fine, even on the nights I didn't believe it. There was one afternoon that I think about more than the rest. Owen had a baseball game and Dean had promised, sworn, to be there. Owen wore his good socks. He kept looking at the fence by the parking lot for his dad's car. Dean never came. After the game, Owen didn't cry. He just got very quiet and asked me, in the car, "Did Dad get a new family?" Because by then, Dean and Brooke had a baby on the way, and somehow my 9-year-old had done the math that I'd been refusing to do, which is that you can be replaced. I pulled over into Old Green's parking lot and I held him and I told him the truest thing I know, which is that nobody, ever, in the whole history of the world has been able to replace him, and they never will. I don't know if he believed me. I'm still working on making sure he does. So when people ask why I fought so hard for a little pie shop, that's the answer. It was never about pie. It was about being the one thing in my children's lives that did not fall apart when it was supposed to. Now, back to that Saturday. The divorce had technically finalized 3 months earlier. I'd kept the bakery on paper, but the settlement left it tangled in liens and the threat of an appeal. And Dean had walked away owing me support he was already behind on. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong about which worst. Because what I didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that during all those years Dean was helping with the books, he hadn't just muddied the water to confuse the lawyers. He'd been skimming, slowly, carefully, a few $100s at a time, out of the bakery's account and into a separate place where I'd never think to look. And he'd come up with a plan for that money that I still can't fully wrap my head around, because it required a kind of patience with cruelty that I didn't think a person could have toward his own children. That Saturday, Brooke came to my counter to spring the first half of that plan. She didn't know it was about to blow up in her hand. "We don't want this to get messy, Marin," she said, with the man in the gray suit behind her. "We're just here to take what Dean and I are owed." She opened the leather folder on my counter, right on top of the bakery case where the morning's lemon bars were, and she slid a document toward me. "This building was a marital asset. The court left some loose ends. We're prepared to be generous, but we'd like you to sign over Dean's share, or we file to force a sale." She smiled. "I'd hate for the kids to come to school and find Mom's shop closed." That last line. I want you to sit with that line, because she said it about my children, to my face, in the place I'd built for my children, on a Saturday morning with the case still warm from the ovens. Something in me went very calm. Not numb, calm. The way the air goes calm and green right before a storm that's going to take the roof off. And that's when I stepped back and let Camille walk in. I hadn't planned it for that morning exactly, but I planned for a morning like it. Camille had told me weeks earlier, he's going to try one more thing. Men like this always have one more thing. When he does, you call me before you say a single word. So when Brooke had walked in 15 minutes earlier and announced herself, I'd smiled, told her I'd be right with her, and texted Camille 2 words from behind the espresso machine. He came. Camille's office was 4 blocks away. She'd left mid-meeting. She didn't rush in. That's the thing about Camille. She walked in like she had all the time in the world, set her own leather folder on the counter next to Brooke's, and said, "Good morning, I'm Marin's attorney. You must be the new bookkeeper." The way she said bookkeeper, Brooke's smile flickered. The man in the gray suit cleared his throat and said he represented Dean in the matter of the marital property, and Camille said, "Wonderful, then you'll want to see this before your client embarrasses himself any further?" And she opened her folder. Here is what was inside it, and here is the part that took even me weeks to fully understand. When the bakery's numbers had never quite added up over the years, I'd blame myself. I thought I was just bad at the financial side, that I was undercharging, that I was the kind of woman who was good with her hands and bad with money, because that's the story Dean had gently, constantly told me about myself. So, when the divorce got serious, Camille had insisted on something I'd resisted because it cost money I didn't have: a forensic accountant. She'd said, "Marin, I don't think you're bad at money. I think someone wanted you to believe you were." She'd been right. The forensic accountant had followed the trail. Over 7 years, in increments small enough to never trip an alarm, somewhere north of $90,000 had moved out of the bakery's operating account. It hadn't gone to vendors. It hadn't gone to the loan. It had gone, through 2 intermediary accounts, into a 529 college savings plan, a college fund, for Owen and Mabel. When I first heard that, I actually felt a flash of something almost like relief, because at least the money had gone to my kids. Right? At least he'd done one decent thing. Camille watched my face soften and she said gently, "Marin, I need you to keep listening because it's worse than it looks. The 529 wasn't a gift. Dean was the account owner. Under the rules of a 529, the owner controls the money completely. The beneficiary, the kid, has no right to a dime of it. The owner can change the beneficiary. The owner can withdraw it for himself, eat a penalty, and walk away with the rest. He'd built a $90,000 pile of my business's money, dressed it up as love for his children, and kept it under his own thumb. And the plan, the actual plan, was the thing Brooke had come to finish that Saturday. The plan was this. He'd let me think the kids' college was secure. Then, at the right moment, his lawyer would reveal the 529 and offer me a trade. Sign over my share of the bakery building and the children's college fund stays intact. Refuse and he changes the beneficiary or empties it and tells the kids someday that Mom chose her little pie shop over their future. He'd weaponized our children's college money against me. He'd been doing it, patiently, a few $100s at a time, since Owen was 2 years old. I think about that sometimes. that he was planning this when our son was a toddler, that he sat at our kitchen table on Sunday nights with the laptop and a cup of the coffee I made him, and moved money out of my dream and into a trap, and then came to bed and put his arm around me. I'm not telling you that to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that the smile Brooke walked in with that morning was the same smile he'd been wearing in the dark for 7 years, and I'd just never seen it in the light before. What Dean and Brooke didn't know, standing at my counter, was that the forensic accountant had already traced every transfer. And those transfers did two things Dean never intended. First, they proved that the bakery had been profitable enough all along to generate $90,000 in skimmable surplus, which blew up his entire claim that the building was funded with marital money he'd contributed. The records actually showed the original purchase coming straight out of Hazel's inheritance, my separate property, untouched. He'd been so busy hiding money, he forgot that hiding it created a map. Second, moving business funds into a personal account he controlled, while concealing it from me during asset disclosure, wasn't just sleazy, it was fraud. Concealment of assets during a divorce proceeding in front of a judge who does not find that sort of thing charming. Camille laid it all out on my counter in a neat fan of documents, next to the lemon bars, and she said to the man in the gray suit, in the same pleasant voice she used to order her cardamom bun, "Your client diverted business funds, concealed them during mandatory disclosure, and is now attempting to extort my client using those concealed funds. We have the trail. We have the account ownership records. We have the dates. So here's where we are. You can advise, Mr." She used his last name, my old last name, which I'd already started shedding. "To withdraw this claim, sign the building's title fully and finally to Marin, and transfer ownership of that 529 to her as custodian for the children, where it should have been all along. Or we proceed, and your client explains the missing $90,000 to a judge who already doesn't like him. I'll give you until Monday." Brooke's face. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. Just a little, and I've made my peace with that. The color went out of it the way it goes out of someone who has just realized they bet the house on a man who doesn't actually have the cards. She looked at the gray suit. The gray suit was reading the documents, and the longer he read, the stiller he got. And then he said the most lawyer thing a lawyer can say, which is, "We'll be in touch," and put his hand on Brooke's elbow to steer her out. She stopped at the door, though. She turned around, and for a second I thought she was going to threaten me, and instead the strangest thing happened. The mask slipped, and underneath it she just looked young and scared, and she said, "He told me you'd settled. He told me this was already decided." And I understood in that second that Brooke wasn't the architect. She was another person who'd signed something Dean handed her without reading it. I didn't feel warmth toward her, but I felt the anger lose some of its heat, because it's hard to stay furious at someone once you see they're standing on the same trapdoor you used to stand on. "He tells everybody that," I said. "Read your own paperwork, Brooke." Then she left, and the bell over the door did its little tin chime, and Camille exhaled and reached past the documents and helped herself to a lemon bar and said with her mouth full, "These are really good, Marin." And I started laughing and couldn't stop, the kind of laughing that's a little bit crying. And a regular at table 3 asked if everything was all right, and I said, "It's going to be." And for the first time in 2 years, I actually meant it. The Monday came and went, and the gray suit did not, in fact, take it to a judge because there was nothing to take. Within a month, Dean signed the building over, fully, finally. No liens, no loose ends. The 529 was transferred to my control as custodian for the kids, every dollar of it, and I can't touch it for anything but their education even if I wanted to, which is exactly how it should have always been. He didn't go to jail. I'll be honest about why. Camille said we could push for it, that the fraud was clear, and there was a version of me, the version from the worst part of that winter, who wanted it badly. But pushing meant another year of courtrooms, of Owen looking at the parking lot fence, of Mabel asking practical questions a 12-year-old shouldn't have to ask. And it meant making my children the kids whose dad went to prison, which is a thing you don't get to take back. So I let it go. Not for Dean. For them. And I'll admit, a little for me, because I was tired of being a woman defined by what a man had done to her. His own life took care of the rest, the way it usually does without any help from me. The insurance work dried up once word got around town the way word does, in the diner and the hardware store and the school pickup line. Brooke had the baby. They moved to Columbus for what Dean called a fresh start, and what everyone else called leaving before the talk got worse. I heard secondhand that the marriage was already strained. I didn't go looking for the news. It found me, the way it does in a small town, and I noticed that it landed in me softer than I expected. I'd spent 2 years imagining how good his downfall would feel, and when it came, I mostly just felt a quiet, tired kind of nothing, and underneath the nothing, unexpectedly, a little bit of sorrow. Not for him. For the family the four of us were supposed to be. That he set on fire for a feeling that probably didn't even last him a year. The bakery is fine. Better than fine. We did a window display the next spring, Mabel's idea, a hand-lettered sign that said Hazel and Rye, 9 years and still here, and we sold out of the cardamom buns by 10 a.m. for a week straight. I put Camille's photo, the one of her at the corner table with her case files and her flat white, in a little frame by the register, and when people ask, I tell them that's my lawyer and that she came from table 3. Because I want every woman who hears it to know that help sometimes looks like the person who's already been sitting in your life, paying for her own bun, waiting for you to ask. Owen still has his notebook, but it's a different one now. He uses it for batting stats. He made the all-star team last summer, and I was at every single game in the same spot by the fence, and once between innings he looked over to make sure I was there and I waved like a maniac and he pretended to be embarrassed, which is the most beautiful thing a 9-year-old can do for his mother. Mabel is 14 now and she works the register on Saturdays and she's better with the customers than I am. The other day she told me she wants to study business, so nobody can ever do to me what Dad tried to do to you. And I had to go pretend to check on the ovens for a minute. I used to think I was going to win something. That's how I framed it the whole way through. Like, the bakery, the money, the courtroom were a prize, and beating Dean was the point. And we did win, on paper. And I won't pretend the deed in my name doesn't feel good when I lock up at night. But that's not the part I carry. The part I carry is smaller, and it doesn't show up in any settlement. It's that my kids watched something that should have crushed their mother, and it didn't, and now they know, down in the place where you keep the things you learn before you have words for them, that a person can be knocked all the way down and still get up at 4:30 in the morning and make something good with her hands. I didn't teach them that on purpose. I just kept opening the shop. But it turns out that's the only way that lesson ever gets taught. Hazel's marble slab is in my kitchen now, the one she laminated dough on because the room ran too warm. Her no is taped to the wall above it, the cursive going soft at the folds. Do the thing you're scared to do. I read it most mornings before the sun's up and the streetlights are still on and the whole town is asleep except me and the Evans. I was scared of a lot of things for a long time. I'm not anymore, or not in the way that stops you. And the bakery's still here, and so am I. For a long time I believed the thing Dean wanted me to believe. That I was a woman who was good with her hands and bad with everything else, especially money. That belief is what let him sit at our kitchen table for 7 years, moving my bakery's money into a trap, a few $100s at a time, while I blamed myself for numbers that never added up. The lesson I had to learn the hard way is that the people who profit from your smallness will work very hard to keep you small, and they'll do it gently, with a smile, so you thank them for it. The moment I stopped accepting his version of me was the moment everything started to turn. And it didn't turn because I got lucky. It turned because of 3 things I had to build on purpose. The first was the simple refusal to do a wrong thing back. I could have emptied accounts in the dark the way he did. I could have used Owen and Mabel against him the way he used them against me. I didn't, and not because I'm a saint, but because I figured out that the day my kids found out their mom fought dirty would be the day I actually lost, no matter what the deed said. Staying clean wasn't weakness. It was the only way the win could mean anything. The second was learning to think instead of just feeling. For 2 years, I let the hurt drive, and the hurt is loud, but it's a terrible navigator. The day I let Camille bring in a forensic accountant, the day I stopped trusting my fear and started trusting the paper trail, was the day Dean's whole plan became the rope he hung himself with. He was so busy hiding money that he never noticed hiding it. Leaves a map. Clear eyes beat a clever liar every single time, if you're patient enough to look. The third was the part nobody claps for, which is just getting up. 4:30 in the morning, 3 hours of sleep, crying into the royal icing, opening the shop anyway. Nobody saw most of those mornings. They didn't show up in the settlement, but that stubborn, boring refusal to stay down is the whole reason there was still a bakery left to fight for when the fight finally came. If you take anything from what happened to me, let it be this. Be the kind of person who won't cut the corner even when the other person already did. Because your character is the one thing they can't take in any courtroom. Sharpen your mind so nobody can convince you you're foolish just because it's convenient for them. And on the mornings you're sure you can't get up anyway. Because that ordinary, unglamorous grit is what's quietly teaching the people who love you that they can survive anything too. Hazel wrote me a note that said, "Do the thing you're scared to do." I finally understand she didn't mean the bakery. She meant me.